Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Oliver Farrow, Vice Chair of LCDA, a former Director of Care First Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the former CEO of the Oliver Group. Thank you all for joining us today for this exciting session, Leadership Matters, a conversation with Cesar Conde, which is part of our 2020 LCDA Board Leaders Convening Reimagined, Leading in a Time of Crisis and Recovery. We want to thank KPMG, which is our convening sponsor, and NBC Universal Telemundo, and the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD, for sponsoring this session. As many of you know, when we started our LCDA virtual convening, our goal was to hold sessions that focused on leading in a time of crisis, and we plan to have them take place from June through October. Well, as the pandemic and the crisis that surround it continue, so will our virtual convening. We now expect to continue our theme and host additional sessions through the first quarter of 2021. Before we begin, let's go over a few protocols for the session. First, we want to encourage maximum participation using the chat button feature to contribute to the conversation or ask a question. The chat feature is at the bottom center of the Zoom screen. Number two, we ask attendees that you mute your microphone until you are called upon to make a comment or ask a question. The mute button is on the bottom left corner of the Zoom screen. And finally, relaxed Chatham House rules will apply. Panelists and participants are free to share and use the information without reference to the panelist's company affiliation, unless the panelist or the participant approves the quote. So now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Peter Gleason, President and CEO of NACD.
Thank you, Elizabeth. It's really my honor to welcome you to the LCDA Leadership Matters series in conversation with Cesar Conde. The challenges directors face today are more complex, more diverse, and more significant than ever before. And working together as allies to address these issues is imperative, as I'm sure Cesar will confirm. I'm proud to say that NACD and LCDA have successfully forged a strong partnership over the past several years. I'm sure that both of our associations have benefited from it and become more robust as a result. For example, our organizations have worked together to ensure that LCDA's highly qualified members are part of the candidate pool for NACD board searches. LCDA has nominated qualifying companies with Latino directors on their boards for NACD's NXT Awards. And NXT, for those of you that aren't familiar, is a multi-year initiative to help directors and boards understand how to leverage the power of diversity and inclusion to create long-term value. NACD's senior team members serve as faculty for LCDA's Board Ready Institute program, and LCDA and NACD director members serve as speakers at our respective summits. We recognize the need for a strong, diverse, and highly qualified pipeline of professionals to serve as tomorrow's directors. And with that in mind, we recently launched NACD Accelerate, which is a unique 2-year program that creates pathways for executives with little or no experience in the boardroom to prepare for board service. And for those more experienced directors, NACD Directorship Certification is a comprehensive way to highlight your commitment to staying current on the latest information necessary to contribute effectively in the boardroom. And finally, NACD stands proudly alongside LCDA as a collaborative partner and ally to promote diversity and to advocate for more Latinos on corporate boards. So thank you. And now let's meet our guests. Today we have Stephanie Ruhle, NBC anchor and senior business correspondent for NBC News, in conversation with Cesar Conde, chairman of NBC Universal News Group and director of both PepsiCo and of Walmart. Welcome to both of you, and I'll turn it over to Stephanie.
Peter, thank you so much. Cesar, thank you. I am proud to represent NBC. For those of you who are not familiar with NBC Universal, I invite you to turn your televisions on. We are one of the largest news, media, entertainment, advertising, and marketing companies in the world. And in May of 2020, Cesar Conde was named the first Latino American head of NBC Universal's news organization. That includes NBC News, MSNBC, CNBC, and Telemundo News. It's obviously been a very busy few months for Cesar in this role. And in addition to his capacity at NBC, as Peter said, he sits on the board of both Walmart, the largest employer in this country, and PepsiCo. And if you have your children learning from home, chances are you're having a lot of packaged goods from Pepsi in your cupboard at this moment. And to give you a little perspective of the last month for Cesar, today is Thursday. The last three Thursdays, Cesar was overseeing a town hall with Joe Biden, a town hall with President Trump, and the last presidential debate. So here we have him on a Thursday where I would say there's a lot less pressure. Cesar, welcome.
Thanks, Stephanie. It's good to see you. Thank you, Elizabeth and Peter as well. And Stephanie, you've been a tiny busy as well, covering some of the biggest topics around the country and the world. So thanks for making the time as well.
Anytime. I want to start with your story. So many people know who you are and what you do today, but you didn't start in media. You started in investment banking, you made the turn to media, and you actually spent some time as a White House fellow. So can you take us back to the beginning? Tell us the Cesar story.
Sure, I'll do it in a nutshell. And it's great to be with this group. You know, as I'm flipping through the screen here, I see a number of familiar names and faces of old friends. So thanks all for joining and being part of the conversation today. Look, Steph, like millions of people in our Latino community and probably many on this call, my parents were immigrants to this country. My mom from Cuba and my dad from Peru. And then my two younger brothers and I were fortunate to be born here in the States and educated. We were raised in Miami. And I went north to go to school for college and business school. And so as you alluded to, I was one of those folks that it probably took me a little bit in my early career to figure out my passion. And so, you know, I worked, you make it sound very sexy as in investment banking. I worked as an indentured servant in an investment bank between my freshman and, between my college and business school years. I then went to the other side of the pendulum and I joined an entrepreneurial venture, which was in the first, sort of .com stage for those of us on the phone that are on the call that are above a certain age. This was 98, 99, 2000. And then I had the opportunity to go and work in government and public service. I did this program called the White House Fellows Program that you alluded to. I am biased because I had an incredible experience. So I always take 15 seconds to give a plug for it. It's, I think one of the best leadership programs for young professionals coming up through their careers. So if you have folks in your organizations, it's a nonpartisan, bipartisan program that places folks from different walks of life working for one of the cabinet secretaries and the like. And during my time, I had the chance to work for then Secretary of State Colin Powell, and just had a wonderful experience. It was around that time that I had gotten a little bit of the bug for media. And coming out of that experience, I had the opportunity to go work at Univision. I spent 10 wonderful years at Univision. I absolutely loved my experience there. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I kind of knew Brian Robertson and Steve Burke from Comcast, from NBC Universal, and they gave me the opportunity to come and really try to spread my wings and work across new businesses. And so I had the opportunity to do a number of different roles here at NBC Universal during my time. The most recent one was I ran our international business for NBC Universal and also ran our Telemundo enterprise business. And the latter one is has a special place in my heart. I've always loved Hispanic media, and to have the opportunity to see the team that we built really do some incredible things. And Telemundo, for those of you that are familiar, had a great David and Goliath story over the last 5 years to really become a leader in the Hispanic media space. It just brings me a lot of pride of what that team did and the team that we built there. And then to close it out, six months ago, our new CEO, Jeff Shell, was was kind enough to think of me, and allowed me to join what I joke as the COVID club, right? The people who took new jobs during the COVID era. And it's a unique time to transition into any role. It's particularly a unique time to transition into a news organization. But I couldn't be happier. It's a privilege, frankly, to be doing this role and to be part of the team with incredible journalists like you and your colleagues at this moment in time in our country's history.
Can you talk about what this most recent experience is like? When you were mentioning being a White House fellow, you said it's a bipartisan, nonpartisan. In 2020, the average person would say there's no such thing as either one of those things. But I know, knowing you personally, you're leading our organization from a nonpartisan way. Outsiders would laugh if they heard me say that, but I know it's true. So can you help us understand your perspective, your point of view going into this role every day?
I think we are at an inflection point for the role of journalism in our country. I believe in my core that it is one of the fundamental pillars of our democracy. And in the same breath, I would say, I think, we have to all collectively be eyes wide open. We are in a moment in our country where our society is most polarized, certainly at least in a generation. There is a high level of distrust in some pockets of society, of media and mainstream media. And so the role of professional journalism, the role of a trusted source, I think is at its highest peak of importance. And so, through that context, I think the priority that we focus on, at least the perspective we've tried to bring, is our biggest responsibility is to bring relevant news and, more importantly, facts to our audience, and try to give them perspective from all sides, try to give them the facts so that they can make informed decisions for themselves, for their families, not only in their day-to-day lives, but certainly as they face decisions to make when election time comes around. But you are right, we're at a unique moment in our time, but I think that reinforces the importance of having organizations, particularly in the journalism arena, to play an important role in hopefully beginning to build that bridge between the different perspectives in our country. Because I would just close with this, Steph, is that we all know this at our core, but there is so much more that brings us together. There's so much more that we all have in common than what divides us. And so hopefully if we can uncover sort of the topics and the issues that everyone's struggling with, hopefully that allows us to focus on the priorities.
All of us, at the end of the day, when you get through the noise, are trying to take care of our families, ensure that we're physically safe, socially free, financially secure. But given this challenge you have ahead of you, and obviously you would never choose, nor any of us would, to be in this COVID club, does COVID give you the opportunity to raise the importance of news really as a public service?
Well, look, certainly we believe at NBC Universal, I mean, the NBC Universal News Group is at the core of our commitment, is at the core of our public trust. And so we fundamentally believe it has to play a very unique and an important role in this moment in time. And by the way, I think it will transcend this election. I think there was the sort of common thought process that this is very important to ensure we are doing our work during this very difficult era, but I think it will transcend and surpass just the election. I mean, to take a little bit of a step back, Stephanie, I mean, I think it's important to give this context, right? Our country is been, going through three crises really at once. We have a health crisis that triggered an economic crisis, and of course, we've been having an overdue and an important conversation in so many parts of our country about social justice and social inequality. Each of those topics standalone, I think, would have been very complex for any news organization to cover. When you put them all together and cover them simultaneously, it puts a big strain, and it's a big responsibility for, again, not just us, but I think any of our colleagues in the world of news. When you take a step back and say that's all happening within the context of a historical, I think we'd all agree, presidential election cycle, it reinforces the importance of all of us having to have and be able to utilize a trusted source to make informed decisions.
Not to be corny, but given this role that you have, not just within NBC at this time, but within Walmart on their board and Pepsi, being a Latin American, living the Latin American dream, do you ever have pinch me moments about the influence and impact you can have on our country right now?
I don't know about, that's nice of you to say. I'm amongst a lot of friends here, so, we all know each other a long time. I do pinch myself all the time. I think we all feel extraordinarily fortunate to be in the positions that we're in. In the same breath, I do feel very privileged, but I think with that privilege comes a tremendous responsibility. And I think myself, so many people in this conversation, and obviously you, Stephanie, and your colleagues in your roles, I think with that privilege that we all have comes a responsibility to speak truth to the values that we all believe in, ensure that we're speaking up for our communities, and ensure that we're trying to do the right thing, not just when it's easy, that we're trying to advocate for the right thing when it's hard, especially when it's hard.
From a news delivery and consumption perspective, how have things changed in the last 6 months, living through the pandemic, as with what many people would say, the most consequential election of our lifetime, coming in just 5 days?
I'd probably say a few things. One is I think the amount and the level of consumption of news has grown exponentially in this era. And I think it's, by the way, for the entire news organization business, journalism business, it's particularly happened for our networks, and so we're very fortunate. I think it's a confluence of events of why that's happened. One is because we're living through such a difficult time. I think the hunger and the need for people to have information and engagement is important. I think two, the fact that there is a lack of other alternatives of things to do also has contributed, right? We had for a long time no live sports. We had no live theme parks to go to. We had scripted stuff like TV shows and movies stopped being made. And so I think there's a contribution of all those things, but the level of consumption of news and information has gone up. A. B, I think the other thing that we've seen is the consumption habits that we were all seeing, right, as consumers ourselves, but the consumption habits that we've been seeing for years, and the change more specifically in that has accelerated over that time. And so particularly we've seen a shift in a much faster manner to streaming, to mobile consumption, some of the new platforms, audio and the like. And so that doesn't mean that the core business is still not the overwhelming part of the business, but we've seen an accelerated shift during this era to some of these emerging platforms. And so that's two things that we've tried to keep in mind and manage the business around those things.
In terms of resiliency during the pandemic, NBC is one organization among so many others. Many people who are participating with us today lead those organizations. We've learned quickly that we can adjust our businesses and work from home. How hard has it been for you? Basically, since you got your job, every meeting you have is right here.
Yeah, it's funny. Everyone thinks this is like, a very exotic, like big, oh my God, he must be sitting in some really fancy place. I'm sitting in like my home, looking out the window, staring at the screen, right? It's just a reality that we all live in right now. And, you're right. Resilience has been, I think, a key value or skill set at this point for every one of our organizations. Look, change is inevitable. I think I'm a believer, and you have to lean into change because it's just the reality of what we live. One example I would give is, I think, to pick up a little bit of what you were saying, Stephanie, sometimes I think people realize, but sometimes I like to mention it anyways. I mean, our business is an example, just like every other business that had to, adapt very quickly. If you would have said to any of us a year ago that our entire business would be run from, our colleagues' homes, literally, on public broadband services, right? With, everyone doing their own thing every day. I mean, I think we would have all said, you're all crazy. And I give so much credit to our teams, particularly our technical teams, but of course, yourselves, your colleagues and you in front of the camera, but that within a 2 to 3 week period, most people don't know this, but over 90+% of our anchors are now have in-home studios and are doing their respective shows from home. It's a huge shift in the way we do our business. And, the fact that it has worked and it has frankly thrived in so many ways is a testament to everyone. It has not been easy. We've had ups and downs. We've had a lot of lessons learned. And frankly, there are some things we've picked up that hopefully we're going to apply when we go into some semblance of normalcy at some point in the future. But, I just take my hat off to the team, because that, is the embodiment of resilience and adaptation to change.
To that point, I would just tip our hats to the children of NBC, who over this time have become makeup artists, tech experts, as well as in-studio catering.
But I'm glad you say that, because I get the question all the time. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. So now you all have makeup and hair people that go to every single talent's homes? And I'm like, no, that's not the way that works right now.
Wait till you meet my 7-year-old daughter. Thanks to YouTube, she's really become a fantastic makeup artist. Beyond just NBC, as a business leader, given your perspective at Walmart and Pepsi, do you think that a year from now, it's been a huge achievement that we've been able to shift to work from home, but how concerned are you about innovation and productivity being lost in this year?
Look, I tend to be an optimist by nature. I think these difficult situations force us all to look internally and try to find lessons from it and positive things. And so I fundamentally believe that we are picking up new insights, new habits, new ways of doing business that maybe we would have stumbled onto over years, or maybe we would have done it proactively, but it would have taken us a long time. And so I think we're gonna take great things out of this. I'll give you a few examples. I think first, the mindset of having more people work virtually or work from home, or having flexibility in workspaces, I don't think was as strongly held in some of the more traditional Fortune 500 companies. I think we're at a place where it is, very well accepted that, not only can an organization and an individual thrive, in fact, it may be something that benefits the company as well to have that type of flexibility. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see much more open-mindedness as it relates to that. I think second, it opens up, the fact that we have more geographic flexibility, for lack of a better word. It opens up opportunity for so many people that may not have had that access before. A tangible example for us, right? When we looked at certain type of functions, designers, editors, multimedia journalists, producers, and the like, theoretically, all those people would have had to be hubbed somewhere in New York or in LA or Miami and the like. In this new world, because we're seeing it, that people are working very successfully. Why can we not recruit people who have great skill sets that are in the central part of the United States and some of the other markets that we wouldn't have traditionally looked for? And he or she is not forced to move to some of those higher, more expensive markets. We love that. I love that, because it's going to open up a lot of opportunity for a lot of pockets of talent that we may not have tapped into in the past.
Can you speak to that? And do you think it will be able to help you achieve this 50% challenge that you are going for in our news group, to try to create more racial and ethnic and cultural diversity in our news group? Traditionally, we kind of hear this trope. Yeah, we'd really love to have different people at the top. We just don't have the option. They're just not out there. You have said that is baloney. You're taking this challenge on. Can you speak to it?
Sure. Well, I mean, this Zoom call is exhibit A of that it's baloney. We have plenty of talent out there and amazing people that can step up. Maybe as a little bit of context for the group, Stephanie. So we fundamentally as a team believe that the NBC Universal News Group has to be a future-focused organization, and particularly as a news organization, we need to represent in front and behind the camera the communities that we serve all around the country. And so with that context in mind, in July of this past summer, we announced an initiative called the 50% Challenge Initiative. And at its core, there was two fundamental aspirations or goals. The first was that we've committed that we want our workforce to be 50% women and our news group workforce to be 50% people of color. It is an ambitious objective, but I think more importantly than anything, we believe it messages, it sends a very clear signal as to what is our true north, what are our values, and what do we aspire to. And we've been very, very happy, very grateful as to the reception we've received both internally and externally. And to go to your point, that 50% challenge initiative, at its core has that ambition and vision. There's no silver bullet, as we all know from working on a lot of DEI initiatives over many years. So we have a five bullet plan, 5 pillars to our plan, better said, that we've put out there. And we've made a long-term commitment to this initiative, and so it will take time. A lot of people ask us, "Well, oh man, when are you going to achieve that?" And we purposely did not put a specific timeline on it. Really, what we looked at, and some people ask us, by the way, how did we arrive to that number? And we arrive at it through data and demographics. And so most of this group will know this information, but it's worth repeating nonetheless. We are at an inflection point in the United States in 2020. For the first time ever, our country will be a majority people of color for Americans under the age of 18. That's not the future, that's the present in 2020. That will happen for all Americans by the year 2040. And so we want, again, as to be a future focused organization, we want to aspire to not be reactive to those trends, but to be proactive and to lead in this arena.
I don't mean to be sassy when I ask you this. Obviously, this challenge was your idea. How much time are you spending on it? For many years, all of us on this call, we've all been to diversity conferences. We've all been to inclusion events. We've all walked into office buildings where it says diversity, inclusion, empowerment as a company's brand. But those initiatives sort of live in a human resources ghetto. And we rarely see them as a core business imperative for a chairman of an organization. How much time are you spending on this and pushing this to your leaders throughout the organization?
Yeah, so we have 3 fundamental priorities that we've laid out for our company, for our NBC Universal News Group, and it's content, it's connection, and culture. And so there's 3. The 50% diversity, the 50% challenge initiative is at the core of the third one of culture. I would say two things to answer your question, Stephanie. One is we've elevated someone to focus on this, to report directly to me, to focus on it 100% of her time. She's an excellent executive with both editorial and DEI experience. But second, and I think this is the most important thing, is we have tried to make this be part of the DNA, be part of the core culture of what we're changing at the news group. Because the only way to get this real, sustainable, long-term change is not for it to be my plan, but it's to be everyone's plan. And I certainly would not tell you that we're about 120 or 130 days into the 50% challenge. We've already reported out the first 100-day results and the like. So we haven't hit everything we would want to hit, obviously, but what I can tell you is we're making progress, and most inspiring of all is we have seen just an outpouring of desire to get involved. And all of a sudden now in all pockets of the organization, you're seeing the cultural shift happening in an organic way. And I think that's the key to this, is that it happened organically. And so if we can crack that code and have it occur organically without us driving it, then really what we're focused on is implementing the 5 pillars, but the 5th one is the most important, which is measurement. One thing that we have done, and we spent a lot of time thinking through it before we announced it and designed it, but we've implemented specific measurement and more specifically accountability KPIs for our leadership team around DEI. And so the philosophy was straightforward. I have a dear friend of mine, Melody Hobson, who has always advocated this, that you only get results based on the things that you measure. And at Fortune 500 companies, we measure revenue, we measure EBITDA, we measure a variety of financial metrics. And guess what? We all get those results. And so, but we don't measure DEI in the same way. And so we, starting in 2021, our senior leadership team will have DEI KPIs similar to the way we track ratings or financial metrics in our industry. And so we hope that that will help align and signal the priority and the values we have on this front.
Well, I've heard in the news buds chirping that Melody Hobson's name has been floated as a possible Treasury Secretary candidate. So maybe that's something, and her ideals are something we'll hear a lot more about in the coming months. We talked about who you see as the right people, the right demographic in terms of who you hire. But let's talk about the stories our news organization tells. And while you're not giving your opinion, your point of view is leading our culture. And oftentimes, whether you're talking about politics or simply the media, how we cover the Latino community in the United States is most often an immigration story. You very rarely hear about Latinos being the fastest growing demographic in terms of entrepreneurship and small business owners. How do we start shifting the stories we tell away from strictly immigration stories? Because there's not one story.
Yeah, no, it's an important topic. I would say, look, first is the importance of, and the reason for some of this work in the DEI space and the 50% challenge initiative is not because simply it's the right thing to do. It's most importantly, it's because it's the right thing to do for our business. If we execute on this, we are any consumer facing business here in the United States is going to benefit from doing smart things on the diversity, equity, and inclusion front. And so I'd say that as a first statement. I think the second is when it comes to speaking about the Hispanic experience, the Latino experience here in the United States, I do think there's a fundamental shift that is starting to occur, but we as individuals and we collectively as a group have to accelerate that. By the way, in boardrooms, but also in the media and the like. And that's that the Latino story is no longer about numbers and demographics. It's about economic power. It's about spending power. And I think that begins to resonate more with obviously the overall population, but I think it particularly resonates more with corporate America, because when people realize that if you want to find growth here in the United States, this is not a demographic, this is the fundamental demographic that one needs to focus on. And so I think more and more as media and some of our colleagues become educated about it, it completely transforms the way you speak about the Latino community, because the Latino community is what's driving economic growth here in the United States. It's, as we all know the story too well, prior to COVID, it's been driving small and medium business growth in the country. The importance of suppliers and those type of procurement services to large Fortune 500 companies, that is a very, very important piece because those companies are serving that consumer increasingly. And so I think that's where the conversation is beginning to go, but I do think it needs to accelerate. And as more and more people get educated on it, I think that's the relevant story.
When we broaden the scope and tell these different stories, does it give us a chance to connect with our consumer or our viewer more? People can get information in 2020 from anywhere. And we've learned, especially in this age of disinformation, we don't trust information, but we trust relationships. How important is it for you across all of these news platforms to build relationships and understand our consumers and viewers?
Yeah, no, look, I think it's at its core, right? We need to, as a business, right? We have the public trust. We want to make sure we get news and facts out as we discussed. But B, the other part of our business is we want to make sure we're creating engagement, we're creating loyalty with consumers. And I think the way to do that is to give relevant information, to give authentic information that is of use to those different constituencies. And so, to take the Latino community, the Latino experience, yes, if we tell more stories that resonate and talk about topics that resonate with our community, one would like to think that we're going to create more connectivity and engagement. And for us at NBC Universal, for example, we do an incredible job on that already on Telemundo, right? Because it's in our DNA, it's inorganic in that part of the business. We need to make sure that that's happening in other parts of our business as well. But I also think there's an additional benefit, is that when we tell these stories, the broader population, I think, becomes more versed or better versed in the experiences that other people have lived or are living. And I think when we all begin to understand each other a little bit better, those misperceptions or misconceptions begin to close. And I think that's for the good of all in the end.
I want you to try to put 3 hats on right now. The pandemic has hit every person, every industry in this country. But given your role at NBC Universal, as well as the board seats you hold at Pepsi and Walmart, how do you see the pandemic impacting these different industries?
Look, I would tell you on the media side, I think it is at its core, it has accelerated the trends in consumption change than we have seen. I touched on it briefly at the beginning, but I think that is the material impact on the media industry. We're seeing a faster shift to new emerging platform consumption. So that's first. I think on the Walmart and PepsiCo side, to some degree, the ability for us as companies to be nimble enough and thoughtful enough to change our manufacturing process, to change our distribution processes, so that we can adapt to the needs that we were seeing in the marketplace. I think anyone in our organizations would say that we have learned a tremendous amount. We are cognizant that there's different challenges that we will be facing going forward, but this experience has clearly taught us a tremendous amount. And I would like to think, just using the example of this pandemic, that if and when we see another increase, I do not think we're going to see some of the gaps in supply in the supply chain that we saw in the first or second waves of this piece. And so I think the companies that have been able to adapt the fastest to that are the ones that will succeed. And I'd say, maybe a third one, Stephanie, is, I think this one is primarily for Walmart, is the acceleration here in this case also applies of consumption habits. And in this case, delivery of service in a next day or in a minimum 2-day case accelerated tremendously. And fortunately, and this is just an example for us at Walmart, the fact that we were in preparation and ready to launch our Walmart Plus service to compete with Amazon Prime, we were able to accelerate that and I think fill a real need in the marketplace. And I think it speaks to companies' preparedness, to trying to look around the corner, but also companies need sometimes to throw out the playbook and just move a little faster and more nimble than they would have been expected to do.
In order to continue to grow and develop, you always have to be learning. Is there anything from Pepsi or Walmart, given the positions that you hold, that you've learned about those companies, about the way they operate, that you have then been able to bring to NBC or vice versa?
Yeah, no, I think there's a tremendous amount on both fronts. I would tell you on the Walmart front, I think Walmart, it's a, what the Walton family and the vision that they had over so many years is really just staggering. And to me, the part that really captured my attention and spent a lot of time on the front end is, as you alluded to, they're the largest employer, private employer in the country, largest employer in the world after the U.S. government and the Chinese government. And so anything that they do within a corporate environment actually has some sort of public policy implication. And so I think looking at business decisions and how they can impact public policy, I think has been a lesson. I think the inverse or the reverse is also true in that if there is a challenge or an issue in our community, in our country, private sector, corporations can play an important role. And I think you're beginning to see some of that philosophy, some of that thinking come through from so many Fortune 500 companies, many that are represented by some of my peers that are on their boards. You know, just to use the example of the BRT, the Business Roundtable, Doug McMillan is now chairing it. He just took over from Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan before. And I think taking what Jamie did and Doug has taken the same philosophy and carried it to the next level, which is to say, what are some of the challenges that our country is facing that the private sector can uniquely add value or help address as a society? And I think it brings out the topic that corporations need to ensure that they're thinking through their contribution, not just to their shareholders and the bottom line, because that always has to be obviously a priority, but they also have a priority to the communities that they serve. And I think that's a great development in corporate America for us, and I think we'll benefit as a country from it.
This is all pushing us to what Mark Benioff most often likes to talk about in terms of stakeholder capitalism, that in order for your business to be successful, it is not just about the bottom line or shareholders, but it's about your employees and your customers. And this question sort of touches both Walmart and NBC News. A few months ago, the president of Walmart in the Americas, I had asked him, what is the most difficult thing for your employees? As the largest employer, it was just before the rest of the country was basically reopening. And he said to me, in certain parts of our country, in certain stores, getting customers to adhere to the new protocols, to the new safety policies. And I said, really? You're kidding me. And he said, well, because in certain parts of the country, COVID hasn't hit yet. And people only see it on the news and they don't trust the news. So as someone who sees both of that, right, who sits on the board of the largest employer who has challenges because certain parts of the country don't trust the information we put out, how do we start to bridge those two things as a news organization, touch all different parts of our country and cultures so we want to have this trusted relationship?
Yeah, look, there's not an easy answer to that, Stephanie, because I think that is one of the fundamental challenges of not just us as an industry. I think it's us as a country. It's how do we identify, how do we find that common ground and have the conversations focus around those priorities, find solutions, find the path forward on the issues that we all care about, right? We all care about healthcare. We all care about our jobs and the safety of our families. That our families have access to great education so that they can maximize their professional potential here in the United States. These are the things that matter to people. And so we need to help the conversation go to those topics, base those conversations on facts. And the role that we are going to continue to try to play as a trusted news source is to ensure that people understand the rigor that goes into the reporting that goes out, into the rigor that goes into the fact checking that we do when we put our content out, into the rigor and the importance that we put on giving our journalists the opportunity, every opportunity, to ask our leaders the tough questions that are on voters' minds. And I think that's the primary role we can play. I think on the Walmart side, Walmart and PepsiCo and so many companies here, they have an incredible ability to see early on some of the trends that are coming through our economy. The example that I'm assuming you're alluding to, John Ferner, the trend that John is saying to you there, right, is, Walmart has, a footprint around the country, and we literally can see trends cropping up, weeks, months, whatever the topic may be, in advance. And hopefully we can be thoughtful and bring some good lessons from that.
When you mentioned fact checking and rigor, I know firsthand how hard it is to get legal and standards at NBC to sign off on the work we want to do. That's not the case for the social media giants. And this is a participant is asking us if you could weigh in on this debate of where social media giants come in terms of millions of people across this country get their news, get their information from platforms that don't have any of the fact checking and rigor that you speak to. How do we start to address that? Is it a regulation issue?
Yeah, I won't comment on specifically the social media companies and the discussion that's occurring right now around that front in our government. What I will tell you is I think what's important is we have to ensure that audiences understand that all news is not created equal. All sources of information is not created equal. And so there has clearly been over the last 10 to 15 years, right, a proliferation of places where people can consume news, right? People sometimes ask, gosh, when are we going to have another Cronkite? That was so easy back then. Well, that was easy then because we had 3, broadcast networks, and that's all anyone watched, right? Then we had, the evolution into cable news, and we had multiple channels and multiple networks and the like. And then we had the iteration into social media. And so the choices and the availability for people to get news is infinite at this point. But to your point, there are very few places, that have the standards, the rigor, the resources to do the proper vetting, the proper checking, the proper fact finding to put it out. And so I think part of the solution is to help educate audience as to who are the news outlets that go through that process, and maybe educate them about the process. They may agree or disagree with what they see or what topics are chosen to cover, but at least they'll understand the process. The second thing I would say is I think it's also important for people to understand that there is like a traditional newspaper, right? There is hard news, which is reporting, right? Is talking about a topic, talking about the facts, it's well researched and the like. And then you can turn to the back of your Wall Street Journal and New York Times, and you can read the editorial piece or perspective page and the like. And that's what that is. It is a person's perspective. And there are those two things out in all types of news consumption vehicles, but in the large media companies, both exist, and that's okay. It's good to have both of them. You can offer both of the services, but people have to understand that those are two completely different offerings.
Do you think that people get confused by that, or get confused by the difference between having a point of view and an opinion? When I think of Cesar Conde, you're someone who certainly has a point of view, and it is your goal for our viewers and readers to get better and smarter, to be more informed, not just to give them information. But right now, other organizations or other people in your position don't really see a difference between the two. Given that, how hard is it for you to communicate and build that trust with viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a collective responsibility for all of us. It's not one person's. The two is, you're right. It is, for the typical consumer, and no fault of theirs. The media has probably been certainly a contributor to this. It is sometimes hard to differentiate, but I think it's important, and that's part of the overarching process that has to occur. I think it's important for all of us to understand that there are different types of offerings that are being given. Some that is hard news, and some that is analysis, perspective, and the like. And again, that's okay, as long as people know what it is that they're consuming, and then they can make their decisions, they can come to their conclusions based on that.
When you mentioned Walter Cronkite, it makes me think, does that make your job harder than ever? When you said it's our collective responsibility, when Walter Cronkite existed, there were no social media platforms. And now you're also wrangling your own journalists who could say, yes, I could deliver the news, or I could become super famous if I become extreme, if I become outrageous. And how hard is it, given your position, to wrangle all of that and maintain NBC as the premier brand? Because in playing the long game, that is how all of us, both your employees and our viewers, will win. But in the short term, people are drawn to the bright lights and the crazy.
Well, look, I would tell you, Stephanie, I think the benefit, the competitive advantage that we have is at NBC Universal is we have the privilege, frankly, of having so many incredible journalists, brands, franchises under one roof, under one umbrella. So we really are a portfolio. And why do I say that, right? We always, at our core, our shining bright light is NBC News, right? But under NBC News, we have incredible franchises like the Today Show that serves a certain type of audience and serves a certain purpose, right? You have nightly news with an incredible colleague of ours like Lester Holt, right? And then you have a franchise like Meet the Press, right? That speaks to, again, a specific constituency and serves a particular purpose on Sundays. You then have an incredible network like MSNBC. MSNBC during the day has hard news and has incredible breaking news and keeps people up to date. But in the mornings and in the evenings, it offers political analysis, political perspective, and the like. And that's great. We have a number of different options and services for perspectives for people to be able to consume. Our CNBC business looks at the world through the filter of money and the filter of business. We love that. We're serving a particular consumer and we're super serving their needs of information and the like. We have started a new startup, for lack of a better word, of news within CNBC, in that we're taking the prime time period and we just launched a new broadcast with Shepard Smith. And that has a different perspective we're offering. We're looking at, it's a hard news show, but we're looking at it through the filter of business, through the filter of capitalism. And so tackling topics like COVID, tackling topics like the election, but through the filter of that gives us the ability to give a different experience and a different perspective and set of information. And so it's a long-winded way. And by the way, of course, Telemundo News super serves a part of our American community, our Latino community, speaking to the issues that impact and matter most to Latinos. And so I give you that as a long-winded answer to your question, which is we have the ability now to serve so many different audiences. And I think that's important because there are a lot of needs and not everything can address the exact same thing of everyone.
Well, our colleagues in the audience today have the ability to serve on a lot more boards, and they have some questions about that I want to share. Beyond Walmart and Pepsi, what is the chatter and real actions? We know there's a lot of talk about it, real actions about diversifying boardrooms. You know, we talked about what the numbers are in this country in terms of Latinos in this country, women in this country, but when you actually look at who comprises boards, it's still a white man's game.
Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of work, to put it nicely, that still needs to be done here. I would tell you a few quick things. One is, I think the conversation that is occurring in many boardrooms and has to occur in many more boardrooms at the right levels is, again, if you're a corporation based here in the United States, or frankly based anywhere, but you are looking and you're functioning here in the United States and you're looking for growth, this is a demographic that is at the core of your future. And so that's not an opinion, that's data driven for the most part. And so this is not, the first point is really that this is not a nice thing to do. Don't do this because this is good for business, right? And so I think the economic discussion and rationale is extraordinarily important. It's increasingly happening. I think it has to happen further, utilizing data to make the point. Look, I think the second is, and this is a tough topic in some boardrooms, but I think it's relevant to all of us. I think a lot of historically corporations, clearly some don't have any Latinos or Hispanics that should in their boardroom, so the number is 0. But then there's some that only have 1, and that has been the case historically for a long time. And I think one of the important points is to also push our friends and colleagues is to say it doesn't need to be 1, right? There's plenty of qualified people. It can be 2, it can be 3. And I think that changes sometimes the conversation, because many companies with their hearts in the right place feel like, we have an incredible executive that is serving a purpose here at our board, and he or she happens to be Latino or Latina. We're done, right? And that's not the case. I think we have to change a little bit of that thinking. Look, and I would then flip maybe the last one, Stephanie. I do think there's a responsibility on this side of the table, figuratively, which is all of my colleagues on this call, is if we have the privilege and the ability to sit on a board, I think we have to be vocal. And, I've heard people in some occasions say, the beginning, or, you got to be a little mellow and quiet. and you don't want to be the person of color speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. I respectfully disagree with that. I think we have to be articulate. We have to be based on data, and we have to advocate for why it's important for our communities to be represented, to help the businesses that we're serving.
Are there certain areas, business lines that corporate boards should spend more time focusing on, right? Every member of a corporate board is certainly focused on the shareholder, but should corporate boards start to focus on the employee, the labor force, the customer?
Yeah, I mean, look, yeah, the short answer is absolutely. I think, I like to think most of the companies that we serve on do that in some shape or form. I can certainly say the companies that I have the privilege of working with at Walmart and PepsiCo do so. I'm particularly, happy about an initiative that, again, I'm fortunate to be there, but we have a great team and great leader at PepsiCo in Ramon. And Ramon is our new CEO. We've seen a tremendous amount of movement, rightfully so, in initiatives that are helping empower the Black community here in the United States. PepsiCo made a very big commitment on that front, and just a couple of weeks ago, just announced, I think, one of the first of its kind of a multifaceted initiative of investing in the Hispanic community and the Latino community here in the United States. Over $400 million of commitment over a 5-year horizon, and that includes everything from procurement, philanthropy, and obviously people. To go to your point, Stephanie, is how do we identify and recruit the best and brightest of the Latino community to PepsiCo? How do then we retain them, and more importantly, how do we help mentor those that are at PepsiCo, so that we see more and more in the C-level type roles over a period of time. And so I think we have to hopefully see more Fortune 500 companies follow that example.
Has your point, certainly your perspective has changed in the last 6 months because you're leading NBC and your seats on these corporate boards respectively, but has your point of view changed? Have you learned anything? Have you changed your point of view since sitting in these positions through COVID? Besides, hey, working from home, we can get a lot of work done.
But I'm sorry, I don't think I followed. Ted, have I changed my point of view?
The last 6 months, have you changed the way you see the world at all? Has your leadership style changed?
Look, as I alluded to before, I'm at my core fundamentally an optimist, and so I think we take all of these difficult things and we learn from it, and we're all going to come out stronger for it. And I fundamentally believe that. What I would say is I think it has reinforced a few things, so at least for me, right? When it comes to team building, I knew the type of qualities and values that I look for people on my team. I've tripled on that, right? And so you're looking for great athletes, people that are going to be able to adapt to change, people who are team players, and people who are transparent and direct, especially in moments of crisis. And so I think that's helped me reinforce on that front. And I think the second thing I tell you is, the companies that are able to adapt and be most nimble and not be afraid to question processes that they had in the past are the ones that are going to succeed. And our philosophy, and I'm sure many on this call would agree, our philosophy is we're all suffering through this. We got to prioritize and make sure we take care of our team members, obviously our families and the like, but we also take care of our business. And if we are going to suffer, of course, but if we can come out of this stronger than how we went in, then we're going to be better for it.
We can do it together. Together we will rise. Cesar, I know what a busy time this is. I know how valuable your time is. Thank you so much for sharing this hour with me, and to everyone who's joined us. I think we got to most of your questions. Peter, thank you. Elizabeth, I think you might want to share a few words before we sign off.
Yes, I just want to thank you, Cesar, and Peter for a great discussion. But I want to remind the audience that we're going to have a session feedback form coming in an email shortly. So remember to check it out, fill it out, and then check up the upcoming LCDA virtual convening sessions on our website. Anyway, everyone, have a great night, great discussion. See you soon. Thank you.
Thanks all. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, Cesar.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.